A Werewolf Shifter romance written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The air in the moon-shadowed territory thrummed, a magic almost palpable. 8 years ago, it was the eve. Lyra's public bonding to Rhys, the alpha whose gaze held the promise of 1,000 sunrises. His touch, even the mere brush of his hand against hers, sent shivers of fated certainty right through her. A joyous resonance, echoing the deep, contented hum of their shared soul. Lyra, then a spirited omega, her heart knowing only the boundless optimism of true love found, had spent the day amidst excited, respectful whispers. The pack, alive with anticipation. Her future, unfurling before her like a path paved with moonlight. Rhys was more than an alpha. He was the other half of her spirit, and tomorrow they would declare it before all. That evening, under a sky pregnant with stars, Rhys had pulled her into a secluded glade, their sacred space. "Tomorrow, my Lyra," he'd murmured, his voice thick with emotion, his silver eyes alight with a fierce tenderness. Hers alone. "The pack sees what my soul already knows. You are my Luna, my beginning, my always." He'd pressed a kiss to her brow, a vow, sealed in warmth, an unwavering devotion, but always had a cruelly short lifespan. Hours later, the joyous hum had curdled into a screech of impending dread. Rhys was late for their final private meeting with the elders. Unthinkably late. A knot of ice began to form in Lyra's chest, tightening with every passing minute. Every polite deflection from the senior advisor, Marcus, whose gaze always seemed to linger a moment too long, whose condolences about Rhys's tardiness felt smooth, practiced, almost anticipatory. "He is an alpha, Lyra," Marcus had said, his voice a low thrum of supposed reassurance. Somehow it felt like a silken threat. "Matters of pack security, last-minute patrols, they can be demanding. He will be here." But he wasn't. The night bled into a frantic, disbelieving dawn. Lyra, her bonding finery feeling like a shroud, searched every familiar path. Her calls for Rhys echoing, unanswered, through the silent, indifferent forest. The pack buzzed. Confusion, then unease, then hushed, pitying whispers that flayed Lyra's raw nerves. No trace, no fight, no word. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole, or he had simply walked away. The latter. That was the seed Marcus subtly planted. A poisonous whisper, taking root in the fertile ground of pack uncertainty. Perhaps the young alpha had cold feet? Perhaps the responsibility was too great. Perhaps he found someone else. Somewhere else. Lyra felt it. The pack's gaze shifting, from shared anxiety to a sorrowful judgment. Branded, the abandoned mate, the fated bond, once her greatest strength, now throbbed. An open, festering wound, an echo, in an empty chamber. Within days, the unbearable truth settled upon her. Rhys was gone. He had left her. And then, the second blow. A secret terror clutching at her heart, even as the first was still tearing it asunder. Sickness in the mornings, a change within her own body, a burgeoning life. No, lives. That could only be his, theirs. The man who had promised her forever had vanished, leaving her not just with a shattered heart, a publicly fractured bond, but with the impossible, terrifying secret of the alpha's unclaimed echoes growing within her. In a world where lone Lunas with alpha-blooded pups of a vanished alpha were vulnerable prey, and under the watchful, calculating eyes of men like Marcus, Lyra knew one more truth. Her always had to become about them. And to protect them, she too would have to disappear.
The damp clung to me, same as it had for gods how many years now? 8? Each breath was a rasp in the cold, heavy air of this cursed Bloodfang clan cell. My world had shrunk. these 4 stone walls, the rough-hewn cot, and the singular throbbing ache in my bones that never quite faded. Still, sometimes, if I concentrated hard enough, if I shut out the stink of stale blood and unwashed wolf, I could almost catch her scent. Lyra, vanilla and moonlight. It was a ghost, a memory, probably just something my broken mind cooked up, because without it, I'd have nothing. More importantly, the ache wasn't just physical. It was my wolf, my alpha, starved of its pack, its mate, its sky. Because of that, some days were a gray blur of despair. The blood-fang curs. They were inventive with their cruelty. Their goal? Break me. Make me forget I was ever an alpha. Truth be told, they came close. More times than I could count. One of them, a hulking brute named Kalen with eyes like chips of ice, seemed to make it his personal mission. He enjoyed the way wolfsbane slipped into my meager food, made my wolf writhe and weaken. Why keep me alive like this, though? What was their real game? That question. It haunted my waking nightmares. Moments later, the cell door creaked, a sound that always set my teeth on edge. Kalen. He tossed a hunk of dry bread and a tin cup of water onto the filthy floor. "Enjoy, Alpha," he sneered, the word a deliberate sharp insult. He lingered today, though. His usual sneer was there. Yet, there was something else in his eyes. A flicker of something new. Was it unease? Or just a different flavor of his usual malice? He kicked the bread closer. Big day tomorrow, for us anyway. Before he could move, to slam the door, a commotion echoed from down the corridor. A sharp bark, a yelp. Then, silence. Kalen's head snapped up. That flicker in his eyes? It was definitely distraction. He glanced back at me, a quick, almost worried look, then slammed the door shut, the heavy bolts thudding home. But then, the silence that followed, it felt different, thinner somehow. What was happening out there? Could this be anything? The thought, small and fragile as it was, felt like the first ray of sun after an endless night, and it centered on the ghost of vanilla and moonlight. Following that brief commotion, a new kind of energy, sharp and almost painful, pulsed through me. My alpha senses, dulled by years of poison and despair, strained to pierce the stone and steel. Kalen's unusual distraction, his hurried departure, it wasn't normal. The bloodfang were creatures of brutal routine. Any break in it was a crack, however small. And then, I remembered Lyra, how she could read the forest, see the patterns no one else could. "Look deeper, Rhys," she'd whisper, her breath warm against my ear. "Everything leaves a trace." Deep down, I knew the truth. I had to look deeper here, in this pit. I really looked, for the first time in what felt like ages. My eyes scanned the rough walls, the floor, and there it was, a stone, near the base of the far wall, slightly discolored. I'd seen it 1,000 times and dismissed it, but then, remembering Kalen's hurried glance not at the door but lower, towards that wall, it made me reconsider. Maybe it was fate, or just desperation. But I focused on it. It looked no different. Yet, something about the way the faint torchlight from the corridor, a torch that seemed dimmer tonight, another oddity, hit it. To make things worse, my wolf was weak. The wolf's bane a constant, sickening drain. Trying anything was a huge risk, because if I failed, Kalen would make me pay. Despite that, the image of Lyra's smile, the memory of her hand in mine, it pushed me. I needed to know. Was this real? Or was my mind just playing another cruel trick on me? I had to believe in something more than just enduring. I had to believe there was a way back to the moonlight, back to her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming what they'd stolen. Soon after the last guard patrol I could hear faded into silence. For what I guessed was the deepest part of the night, I moved. Every muscle screamed. Pain, an old friend. Without warning, as I pressed against that discolored stone, it shifted, just a fraction. But it moved. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drum of terror and hope. A tiny, almost invisible seam now showed around its edge. This was it. This was the crack, and it led somewhere. The question was, where, and what waited on the other side? In that moment, the world narrowed to the feel of that loose stone beneath my trembling fingers. My breath hitched. This was real. After 8 years of nothing but cold, hard reality, this single shifting stone felt like a dream. But then, the memory of the night they took me flooded back. Sharp, brutal. The ambush, the overwhelming numbers, that searing pain as the poison, swift and paralyzing, coursed through my veins. I remembered the scent of pine and damp earth, the last sight of the moon shadow peaks against a star-dusted sky. Before darkness claimed me. Betrayal. I hadn't known who then, only that it was absolute. Now, though, Marcus's face sometimes swam in those hazy memories, always just out of focus, an open loop in my mind. Why him? What had I ever done to him? As if pulled by a string, my body moved on instinct, years of alpha training, kicking in despite the weakness. Slowly, painstakingly, I worked at the stone. It scraped, loudly, too loudly. Each sound was a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. With every heartbeat, I expected discovery, the heavy tread of boots, Kaylin's cruel laugh. Yet, nothing came. Maybe it was fate that the earlier commotion had left the guards preoccupied, or maybe my luck had finally turned. More importantly, it was Lyra's face that burned behind my eyelids. Her strength, her spirit. I will always find my way back to you, Lyra. I'd vowed that last night under the stars, a vow they'd tried to beat out of me, to poison out of me. But then, they didn't understand. That vow, that bond, it wasn't just in my mind, it was in my blood. My very soul. It was the one thing they couldn't touch, couldn't break. Because of that vow, I found strength I didn't know I still possessed. I would not die in this hole. I would not let them win. Eventually, with a final agonizing tug, the stone came free. It was heavier than I expected. Behind it, not freedom, not yet, but a narrow, dark opening, just big enough to squeeze through. My heart skipped. A beat later, a plan, desperate and wild, began to form. This was more than a crack. It was a path, a dangerous one, yes. But then, all paths worth taking usually are. And just like that, everything changed. My ordinary world of pain and stone was about to be left behind. My first true act of defiance in 8 years. And it was all for her. The scent of vanilla and moonlight, impossibly, seemed a little stronger now.
The scent hit me first, wrong. So utterly wrong for my hidden valley. And then I saw him, a ghost, a nightmare, carved into flesh and bone, standing at the edge of my sanctuary, where no outsider should ever be. My heart hammered, a frantic bird against my ribs. 8 years. 8 years I'd told myself he was gone, a betrayal so complete it had become a scar on my soul. Yet, there he stood. Rhys, older, harder, etched with a pain that mirrored my own. But then, it was undeniably him. My wolf, the one I kept leashed and quiet for the sake of my pups, snarled. A raw, ragged sound tearing from my throat before I could stop it. Every instinct screamed, threat, danger, protect the children. As if pulled by a string, my body moved, shifting before I even thought, interposing myself between him and the path to the small den where Kale, Seraphina, and Finn were probably napping, safe, unaware. You! The word was a shard of ice, ripped from 8 years of frozen grief and fury. "You have no right to be here." My voice trembled, not with fear, never with fear where my pups were concerned, but with a rage so profound it felt like it could split the sky. How dared he? How dared he show his face after shattering my world, after leaving me to pick up the pieces and raise his children in secret and solitude? This man, this memory. He was the reason I built these walls, both around my valley and around my heart. More importantly, he didn't flinch. His eyes, those silver eyes I'd once known better than my own, they widened, then filled with an agony that almost made me pause. Almost. "Lyra," he breathed, and my name on his lips. It was like a brand reigniting. "Lyra, please. I never would have left you." "Liar!" My mind screamed it. My wolf wanted to lunge, to drive him back into whatever shadow he'd crawled from. Because of that primal urge, I dug my claws into the soft earth, anchoring myself. "Save your pretty words, Alpha," I spat, the title a mockery now. "They mean nothing, not anymore." What could he possibly say? What could possibly excuse 8 years of silence? 8 years of me raising our children, his children, alone. Before he could speak again, a rustle, in the undergrowth behind me, sent a fresh spear of panic through my veins. Kyle, my oldest, always so protective, his small dark fur already bristling. He peeked out, then Finn, then Seraphina, her wide eyes fixing on the stranger. In that moment, Rhys saw them, truly saw them. His face, already pale beneath the grime and scars, went ashen. His jaw dropped. It wasn't just shock, it was devastation. A raw, guttural sound escaped him. Something broken. They are... He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. The sight of those 3 impossible, wonderful children, my children, our children, hung in the air between us, heavier than any words. He looked from their confused, wary faces to mine, and his next words were a choked whisper. "I didn't know, Lyra. Gods, I swear, I didn't know." Deep down, she knew the truth. Or did she? His anguish. It felt real, too raw to be faked. But then, how could he not know? Unless his story of leaving was a lie I'd told myself, and the real one was something far, far worse. The thought was a dangerous viper, coiling in my gut. As the silence stretched, my anger warred with a confusing, terrifying flicker of something else. Doubt? Hope? I didn't know what scared me more. Seraphina, my little sensitive soul, took a hesitant step forward, her gaze fixed on Rhys, not with fear, but with an unnerving curiosity. "Mama?" she whispered, her voice small. "Who is he?" That simple question, from my innocent pup, it cracked something inside me. What was I supposed to tell them? Because of that unbearable tension, and because the sight of him looking at our children with such naked pain tore at something I thought long dead. I made a decision. Not forgiveness, not trust. Never trust. But a pause. "You will stay where I can see you," I said, my voice still hard, still cold. "You will not come near them, and you will talk." My mind raced. If he was a threat, I needed to know its nature. If he wasn't, then what was he? What did this mean for us? For our pups? Maybe it was fate that he found us, but it felt more like a curse. He nodded, his eyes still locked on the children, a desperate hunger in them. Moments later, once the pups were ushered back to the safety of the den under Kale's watchful eye, Rhys began to speak. He told a story of ambush, of capture by a brutal clan I'd only heard whispers of, the Bloodfangs. He spoke of years of torment, of wolfsbane, of an unyielding desire to return. And then, He mentioned a name that sent a true chill down my spine. Marcus, my pack's senior advisor. Now it's acting alpha. According to Rhys, Marcus was the architect of his downfall, a betrayer who wanted Rhys gone, who wanted the Moonshadow Pack for himself. Truth be told, it sounded like the ravings of a desperate man. Yet, there was a horrifying consistency to his tale, a grim logic to the cruelty he described. Could it be true? Could the man who had offered me false comfort all those years ago be the monster who had stolen my mate, my future? The valley, my sanctuary, suddenly felt too small. The world outside, too menacing. This ghost from my past hadn't just brought himself back. He'd brought a whole world of danger, of pack politics and deadly vendettas, crashing down around us. My carefully constructed peace shattered. And just like that, everything changed. I had a choice to make, and every option felt like a different kind of betrayal. This was no longer just about my broken heart. It was about the lives of my children. And the man who claimed to be their father.
That fragile truce Lyra had declared, it felt more like a gilded cage. And then, I found myself in her hidden valley. A place of impossible beauty. A sanctuary she'd carved out of sheer will. But then, I was still a prisoner, watched by her wary, wounded eyes. Every breath I took felt like a trespass. The scent of her, vanilla and moonlight, was so much stronger here, so real, it made my chest ache with a grief for 8 lost years. Still, it was a sweet torture compared to the reek of the Bloodfang kennels. My wolf, starved for so long, paced restlessly within me, drawn to her, drawn to the faint, intoxicating scent of pups. Our pups. I'd seen them. 3 of them, a miracle, and a fresh stab of agony, because they looked at me with the same fear and confusion Lyra did. More importantly, her rules were clear. Stay away from them. Stay where I can see you. Her voice was like flint, hard and unforgiving, and I understood. Gods, I did. Because of that, I kept my distance, a shadow at the edge of her carefully constructed world. I watched her. She moved with a strength that stole my breath, a fierce grace born from solitude and motherhood. She was still my Lyra, spirited and true, yet also someone new, someone forged in a fire I hadn't been there to shield her from. Lyra, I started one evening, the silence stretching between us, thick and heavy. I know you have questions. I'll answer anything, anything at all. She just stared, her beautiful face a mask of stone. Words are easy, Alpha, she finally said, her voice low. Actions take time. And just like that, I knew. This was going to be the hardest fight of my life. Not against the Bloodfangs, not even against Marcus, but for her trust. Despite that wall she kept around her, my wolf, restless and yearning, found small comforts. The valley itself hummed with life. A stark contrast to the deathly silence of my cell. And then, one afternoon, I saw her. Serafina. I thought Lyra had called her, the smallest of the 3, with Lyra's wide, knowing eyes. She was at the edge of the small clearing where Lyra allowed me to sit, half hidden by a curtain of willow leaves, just watching me. Not with fear, like her brother Kale, but with an open, unnerving curiosity. Before she could move or her mother could call her back, she darted forward, dropped a clumsily woven ring of wildflowers near my feet, and then vanished, like a forest sprite. My heart, it just cracked. A simple offering, a child's gesture. It meant everything. In fact, it gave me the courage to try again with Lyra that night, because I needed her to understand the danger. Not just to me, but to them. Marcus, I began, my voice quiet. He's not just ambitious, Lyra. He's ruthless. He deals with dark elements, clans like the Bloodfangs. He wouldn't hesitate to use anyone, or anything, to secure his power. I told her about a specific incident before my capture, a border dispute Marcus had resolved with a brutality that had chilled even me back then, a detail she might have heard whispers of, something to make her see. He believes in an old, twisted prophecy, I added, one that speaks of a true alpha line returning with threefold strength. He'd see our children. He'd see them as the ultimate threat. She listened, her expression unreadable. But then, when I mentioned the prophecy, something flickered in her eyes. A shadow. Recognition. I've heard tales, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Old pack lore. I never thought. She didn't finish. But then the way she looked towards the den where the children slept, it told me everything. What followed was a shift. Almost invisible. Yet, it was there. The air between us still crackled with tension, with the ghosts of 8 years of pain. But then a new current joined it. Shared fear. Moments later, as if summoned by our dark conversation, a new scent tainted the pure air of the valley. Faint, but undeniably hostile. Moon shadow warriors. Not just any warriors. I recognized the acrid tang of Kalen's personal guard. The ones Marcus trusted. My wolf surged. They're close, I growled, already moving, my instincts screaming. Lyra was beside me in an instant, her own shift rippling under her skin, her eyes blazing gold. How many? She demanded. Too many for a chance encounter, I replied, my mind racing. They're hunting. Without another word, we moved, a reluctant, unspoken alliance forged in the face of immediate danger. Her knowledge of the valley's hidden paths, its natural traps, combined with my understanding of moonshadow tactics. It was a desperate dance. We couldn't fight them. Not here. Not with the children so close. Misdirection was our only chance. We worked in silence, our movements sometimes brushing, sending shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. It was like our bodies remembered a rhythm, our minds and hearts were still fighting. As if fate demanded it, we managed to steer the patrol towards a treacherous, illusory game trail Lyra had long ago mapped. But then, it was too close. One of them, a lieutenant I vaguely recognized, paused, sniffing the air right where Serafina had been playing only hours before. His eyes narrowed. He picked up something small from the ground, a brightly colored feather she'd treasured. My blood ran cold. He pocketed it. He knew. He knew something, or someone was here. The patrol moved on, diverted for now. But then, the silence they left behind was heavy, suffocating. They'll be back, Lyra stated, her voice flat, devoid of its earlier fire, replaced by a chilling certainty. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see just the betrayed mate. I saw a Luna, weighing the fate of her children. Tell me everything, Rhys, she said, and there was no mockery in her use of my name. Everything you know about Marcus, about what's coming. And just like that, something inside her shifted. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A terrifying, fragile beginning. The fight for our lives, and for our children, had truly begun.
Following his stark admission that they were being hunted, Rhys didn't hold back. That night, under the thin, silver crescent of a new moon, he laid it all bare. The ambush, so swift, so brutal. He never stood a chance. The years in the blood-fanged dungeons, a place where hope went to die, each day a fresh canvas for their cruelty. He spoke of wolfsbane, not just as a weakness, but as a corrosive fire that ate at his soul, trying to sever him from his alpha spirit. And then, he spoke of Marcus, not the kind avuncular advisor I remembered, but a different Marcus, a Marcus who whispered poison, who orchestrated betrayals, whose ambition was a hungry beast. Because of that raw, unvarnished pain in Rhys's voice, The carefully constructed walls around my heart began to crumble, stone by agonizing stone. I listened, every fiber of my being screaming denial, yet a cold dread seeped into my bones. Could a wolf fake such torment in his eyes? Such a hollow echo in his soul where his strength used to blaze? More importantly, he mentioned the prophecy again, the one about the threefold alpha line. Marcus knew about it, Rhys rasped, his gaze distant, lost in some terrible memory. He twisted it, feared it. He once questioned my father about the old bloodlines, about an Omega who might carry a potent legacy. An Omega? My breath hitched. My mother. She'd been from a lineage whispered to hold unusual strength. A line nearly forgotten. Could Marcus have known? Could he have suspected something about me? About what I might bear? Even before Rhys and I were fully mated. To make things worse, a vague memory surfaced. Marcus, years ago, his eyes a little too keen when I'd first been presented to the pack. His questions about my family a little too specific. At the time, I'd dismissed it. Idle curiosity. Now, it felt like a cold hand squeezing my heart. What if this wasn't just about Rhys's alpha title? What if it had always been about the children I might one day have? Children like Kale, Seraphina, and Finn. The next morning, the fragile peace of our hidden valley was shattered, not by whispers, but by the harsh reality of claw and tooth. As if summoned by our darkest fears, Marcus's wolves came, more than before, and with them, a scent that made my wolf recoil in primal disgust. Bloodfang. Rhys was beside me in an instant, no longer the broken prisoner, but the alpha, his eyes blazing with a protective fury that mirrored my own. "They found us!" he snarled. "He used the feather!" No time for I told you so's. No time for anything but the desperate, clawing need to protect our young. The attackers breached the outer wards with savage efficiency. One of them, larger than the others, reeking of the bloodfang taint, lunged straight for the path leading to the den, straight for my pups. Without thinking, my body moved on instinct. I met him midair, a blur of fur and fury, my teeth sinking into his shoulder. Pain exploded along my flank as another warrior raked his claws across me. But then, Rhys was there, a dark shadow of vengeance, tearing the second attacker away. We fought back to back, a desperate, silent dance of survival, our growls harmonizing in a way that spoke of a bond deeper than shared parenthood. It was the bond of fated mates, reawakening in the crucible of battle. In that moment, Kale, my brave, reckless Kale, burst from the den, a tiny, snarling ball of fury trying to defend his siblings. The Bloodfang warrior, momentarily free from my grip, turned towards him, its lips curled back in a horrifying snarl. "No!" The word tore from my soul. Before either could speak or act further, a wave of unseen force, crackling with wild, untamed energy, slammed into the Bloodfang, sending him sprawling. Seraphina! She stood at the den's entrance, her small hands outstretched, her eyes glowing with an eerie silver light, the very air around her vibrating. My quiet, gentle daughter. What was she? After that shocking display, and with Rhys and me pressing the attack with renewed ferocity, the remaining Moonshadow warriors, clearly unnerved by Seraphina's power and the Bloodfang's sudden incapacitation, faltered. They dragged their stunned Bloodfang comrade and retreated, melting back into the forest. But then, the victory, if you could call it that, was hollow. The valley was tainted, our sanctuary, breached. My children, they were not safe here. Not anymore. Later. As the silence stretched and the adrenaline faded, leaving behind only a trembling exhaustion and the sting of my wounds, Rhys gently turned me to face him. His own face was battered, a fresh cut bleeding above his eye. Without another word, he pulled aside the torn fabric of his tunic, revealing a latticework of horrific scars marring his torso, old, silvered wounds mixed with fresher, angrier ones. Rope burns, whip marks, the unmistakable pattern of a ceremonial bloodfang branding iron. Each mark was a testament to the agony he'd described. Each scar screamed the truth his words had only sketched. My breath caught. The sight of that ruined flesh, of what they had done to him, to my mate, it undid me. The last vestiges of my doubt, my anger at him, dissolved, replaced by a searing, white-hot rage directed solely at Marcus. And beneath that, a wave of guilt so profound it nearly buckled my knees. I had believed him capable of abandonment. I had nursed that bitterness for 8 long years. Truth be told, I didn't know what scared me more now, Marcus's evil, or my own blindness. Rhys! My voice trembled, his name an apology, a question, a vow all in one. He just met my gaze, his own filled with a pain that understood mine. We stop him, Lyra, he said, his voice rough but firm. Together. And in his eyes, I saw not the ghost of the Alpha I'd lost, but the promise of the one who had, against all odds, returned. My world tilted again, and just like that, everything changed. Our new reality was one of flight, of battle, but now we faced it as one. The fight had come to us, and now we would take the fight to them.
After that harrowing attack, Lyra's words, "We stop him," together, echoed in my soul. A balm and a war cry all in one. In that moment, something profound shifted between us, something more solid than the fragile truce we'd clung to. It was a pact, forged in blood, witnessed by the terrified eyes of our children, and sealed by the undeniable truth of her wolf standing beside mine. The valley, once her fortress, now felt like a beautiful, vulnerable trap. We knew Marcus would be back because that feather the scout took was a promise of his relentless pursuit, especially now he likely suspected the children's unique heritage, thanks to Seraphina's astonishing display. How could he not, with a bloodfang witnessing it? The thought of that brute reporting back to Marcus, or worse, to his own savage clan, made my blood run cold. Soon after, as the adrenaline faded and Lyra tended to a deep gash on my arm, her touch hesitant at first, then surprisingly gentle, we began to plan. Her den, usually filled with the scent of herbs and sleeping pups, became a war room. "We can't stay here," she stated, her voice low but firm. Her eyes, when they met mine, held no trace of the ice from before, only a burning resolve. "He knows this place now. He knows about the children's abilities." She struggled with that last word, and I understood. What parent wouldn't be terrified by such power in one so young? "Your old packlands," she continued. "Moonshadow territory. It's where he is. It's where we have to go." Going back there, into the heart of Marcus's power, felt like walking into a snare. Yet, she was right. Running forever wasn't an option, not with 3 young alphas, one of whom could apparently move things with her mind. We needed allies, a base, a way to fight back, not just defend. Because of that terrifying clarity, we spent hours poring over makeshift maps Lyra drew in the dirt, discussing every patrol route I could remember, every potential weakness in Marcus's hold, every wolf who might still hold a shred of loyalty to my father's line, to me. What followed was our first true venture beyond the valley's protective cloak since my arrival. Not a full departure, not yet, but a scouting mission, a desperate bid to see what we were truly up against. Lyra insisted on coming. "These are my lands too now," she'd said, a challenge in her gaze that I couldn't deny. We left the children under the fierce, if miniature, protection of Kale, with strict instructions. The forest outside the valley felt wrong, tainted. The air was thick with the scent of Marcus's patrols, more frequent, more aggressive than I'd ever known them to be. And then we found it, a small abandoned den I'd used as a boy, one I'd hoped might shelter an old loyalist beta, Theron. Instead, we found signs of a struggle, and Bloodfang's scent, fresh and sickeningly strong. Theron was gone, or worse. To make things worse, a hidden symbol was carved into the den wall, a Bloodfang marker I hadn't seen in years, one that signified a dark pact, a blood oath. My heart sank. Marcus hadn't just allied with them, he was bound to them. What had he promised them? Resources, territory, or something far more precious? The tension broke when Lyra's hand closed on my arm, her touch surprisingly steady. "He's not just a usurper, Rhys," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the grim truth dawning in mine. "He's sold our pack, hasn't he?" The question hung heavy between us. Before I could answer, a twig snapped nearby. We weren't alone. Two Bloodfang scouts, their yellow eyes glinting with malice, stepped into the clearing. They hadn't scented us, not yet. Without thinking, we moved as one, a silent, deadly current. Lyra, all speed and grace, took one from the side while I met the other head-on, the rage of 8 years fueling my attack. It was brutal, desperate, and quick. But then, as the second one fell, he gurgled a single word. "Children, special. He wants them. All." His eyes glazed over. Lyra looked at me, horror dawning on her face. It wasn't just the prophecy in general. Marcus, and now the Bloodfangs, wanted our children, specifically. Why? What made them so special beyond their alpha blood? That night, back in the temporary safety of the valley, the weight of that Bloodfang's dying words pressed down on us. The children were more than just heirs, more than just a threat to Marcus's power. They were a prize. As if fate demanded it, as we were discussing this new, horrifying revelation, a soft glow emanated from where Finn, our quietest son, was supposedly asleep. We rushed over. He was sitting up, his small hands held out, and between them danced a miniature whirlwind, leaves and dust swirling in a perfect, controlled vortex. He looked up at us, not with fear, but with a focused intensity that mirrored Lyra's when she was tracking. He was controlling it, not a wild burst like Seraphina's, but deliberate. My breath caught. Kyle was the little warrior, Seraphina, the empath with an unknown power, and Finn could command the very air around him. 3 distinct, incredible powers, the threefold alpha line. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about ability. And just like that, everything changed again. There was no question of running, no question of hiding. These children, our children, were a force of nature, and we were the only ones who could protect them, guide them. Leaving the valley was no longer a strategic retreat. It was a declaration of war. We would go to Moonshadow. We would face Marcus. Because of that, there was no other path. Our old life was ash. Our new one, a battlefield.
Following that grim discovery about the Bloodfang Pact and Finn's astonishing power, our departure from the valley was heavy with a terrible urgency. We were a small, desperate pack, running not just from Marcus, but from a fate that seemed to covet our children. Rhys and I had a fragile plan: reach the northern ridges of the Moonshadow territory, a wild, inhospitable place where a few grizzled outcasts, wolves loyal to Rhys's father, were rumored to hide. It was a long shot, a whisper of a hope. But then, hope, it seemed, was a luxury Marcus was determined to strip from us. We'd barely made 2 days' hard travel, the children pushed to their limits, when we found our intended path. Blocked. Not just by a patrol, but by a scar of felled trees and hastily erected barricades, reeking of Moonshadow and Bloodfang. A clear message. He knew. Or he'd anticipated. How could he be everywhere? As the silence stretched, a cold dread settled in my heart. "He's toying with us," I whispered to Rhys, the taste of ash in my mouth. "This is too precise." Rhys's jaw was tight, his eyes like chips of ice as he surveyed the blockade. "Or someone told him our route," he said, his voice a low growl. "Someone we'd thought to trust?" The thought was a fresh stab of pain. Were there no untainted souls left in our world? What's worse, pinned to one of the felled logs was a tattered piece of fabric, unmistakably from the cloak of Lyra, the old healer who had helped me escape all those years ago, the one I'd hoped might still be a secret ally, a warning, or a statement. Had he found her? Oh gods, Lyra. The wind carried a faint metallic scent from beyond the barricade. Blood. Old, but there. My stomach churned. Was this where all paths ended? In Marcus's cruel, knowing traps? Before we could move or even properly grieve the loss of that potential sanctuary, they were on us. Without warning, they poured from the trees, a tide of dark fur and glinting teeth. Marcus's enforcers, their ranks swelled by at least 3 hulking bloodfang brutes. They'd herded us, played us right into this ambush. This wasn't a scouting party. This was an execution squad. "Lyra, run! Take the children!" Rhys roared, shoving me towards the dense undergrowth, his own form shifting, a magnificent, silver-furred alpha hurling himself into the fray. He was outnumbered, hopelessly so, yet he fought like a demon, a whirlwind of claw and fury, buying us precious seconds. I bundled the terrified pups, Kale trying to snarl bravely, Seraphina's eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own, Finn clutching my leg. "Go, Mama!" Kale yelped. I ran, my heart tearing with every step that took me further from Rhys. I could hear the snarls, the sickening thud of impact, his roars of defiance and pain. As if pulled by a string, I looked back just once, a terrible mistake. I saw him go down, buried under a wave of attackers. I saw the flash of a silver net, weighted and cruel, something designed to hold even an alpha. And then his eyes found mine across the chaos, burning with a desperate light. "The Moonstone Ridge," he bellowed, his voice raw, carrying over the din. "The Twin Oaks. Remember the story, Lyra. Protect them." Between one breath and the next, the bloodfangs were dragging him, bound and bleeding, into the shadows. Gone. Just like that. Again. But this time it wasn't abandonment. It was sacrifice. A sacrifice that left me gutted, hollowed out, stumbling through the forest with 3 terrified children and a single cryptic clue. What story? What Twin Oaks? My mind was a numb, screaming void. That night, huddled in a shallow, damp cave miles from that place of horror, the reality crashed down. Rhys was gone. Captured. Or worse. The children were asleep finally, their small bodies curled together for warmth, their faces tear-streaked even in slumber. But then, sleep wouldn't come for me. The silence of the cave was a roaring torment, filled with the echoes of his last shout, the image of his capture replaying endlessly. My fault. I'd let him come back into our lives. I'd trusted. We'd fought together. And now he was paying the price. My fierce independence, my belief that I needed no one, had it all been a lie to protect myself from this exact pain, this unbearable tearing of the soul? 8 years ago, his disappearance had shattered me. This was a different kind of breaking. This was knowing he'd chosen this. For us. Deep down, I knew the truth. Marcus wouldn't just hold him. He'd make an example of him. And he'd still come for the children. In the quiet that followed my ragged sobs, my hand brushed against something small and hard in the pocket of my tunic. Rhys must have slipped it there during the desperate moments before the fight. My fingers closed around it. A small, smooth river stone, etched with a barely visible carving. 2 interlocked oak trees, the Twin Oaks, and a faint, almost imperceptible tingling on my mating mark, a whisper against the despair. Was it a sign? A path? Or just the last, desperate prayer of a dying alpha for his mate? I didn't know what scared me more. The thought of him dead, or the sliver of hope that he might still be alive, enduring unimaginable torment, waiting for a rescue I had no idea how to mount. The Moonstone Ridge. It was a place of old legends, a place my mother had once told me stories about, stories of sanctuary and power. Could that be what he meant? The weight of it all, the responsibility, it was crushing. My world had narrowed to this damp cave, this impossible choice, and the 3 precious lives depending on me.
In the stillness that followed that night of utter despair, the small etched stone Rhys had pressed into my hand felt like the only solid thing in a world turned to ash. Moonstone Ridge. The twin oaks. His last desperate words. And then, like a forgotten melody surfacing from the depths of memory, my mother's voice whispered through my mind. She used to tell me stories. Tales of the Moonstone Ridge, a place sacred to our line, a place where the veil between worlds thinned, and where 2 ancient oaks stood as sentinels to a hidden sanctuary, a place of refuge, a place of power. Could this be it? Could this be more than just a dying alpha's wish? As if fate demanded it, Seraphina stirred beside me, her small hand reaching for mine. "Mama," she mumbled, her eyes still closed but glowing faintly with that now familiar silver light. "Papa, he's hurt, so cold, but he's waiting. The mountain, it calls us." My heart leaped. It wasn't just a story, it was a path, a sliver of hope, sharp and bright in the suffocating darkness. Because of that fragile ember, I roused Kale and Finn. "We're moving," I told them, my voice hoarse but firm. "To Moonstone Ridge. Your father, he wants us to go there." The journey was a nightmare. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every rustle of leaves a herald of Marcus's hunters. The children, bless their resilient hearts, were troopers. Kale, my little warrior, took it upon himself to scout tiny distances ahead, his small nose twitching. And then Finn, my quiet storm, surprised us all when a patrol got too close. Without thinking, he threw out a hand, and a sudden gust of wind, impossibly strong for such a small pup, kicked up a blinding swirl of dust and leaves, giving us precious seconds to melt back into the deeper woods. He looked as stunned as I felt. These powers, they were growing, changing. Were they a blessing? Or a curse that painted an even bigger target on their backs? Deep down, I knew the truth. They were both. And it was my job to help them wield the blessing and survive the curse. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity of fear and exhaustion, we saw them. 2 colossal oak trees, their branches intertwined like ancient lovers, standing guard at the base of a sheer cliff face on Moonstone Ridge, just like in Mama's stories, just like the carving on Rhys's stone. As if pulled by a string, I approached, the stone warm in my palm. There were no obvious paths, no hidden caves. But then, as I touched the larger oak, the one with a scar shaped like a crescent moon, the stone in my hand pulsed, with a soft light. And then, a section of the cliff face beside the tree shimmered, like heat haze over summer stone, and a narrow opening appeared, dark and inviting. My breath caught. This was it. This was the sanctuary. Before I could move, a figure emerged from the opening, not one of Rhys's father's grizzled outcasts, but a woman, ancient. Her fur the silver of winter moonlight, her eyes holding the wisdom of ages. Lyra, but different. Older, yes, but radiating a quiet power I'd never sensed before. "You were expected, child of the moon," she said, her voice like rustling leaves. And the Alpha's echoes. "Rhys. He told you well." In the quiet that followed her startling appearance, Lyra, or this powerful version of her, led us into a series of glowing caverns, a hidden world beneath Moonstone Ridge. She knew. She knew everything. About Marcus, about the Bloodfangs, about the prophecy, and the true nature of our children's threefold power. "Marcus plans to perform a binding ritual," she explained, her ancient eyes grim. "During the coming eclipse, just days from now, he seeks to tie the Bloodfang Alpha to himself, to solidify his claim, and to silence any other claimants to the Moonshadow Alpha ship, permanently, which meant Rhys and my children. He holds Rhys in the old dungeons, beneath the council hall, she continued. But there is a way, a forgotten path, known only to those of your mother's line, Lyra, a path that can lead you unseen. More importantly, she revealed that the sanctuary itself held an energy, an ancient magic that could amplify certain shifter abilities if one knew how to channel it. She looked pointedly at Kyle, then Seraphina, then Finn. As if fate whispered, a plan began to form in my mind. Desperate, terrifying, but the only one we had. That night, with Ilara's guidance, we prepared. She taught me how to focus my Luna instincts, how to draw on the ridge's subtle power to steady my own resolve. She showed Kale how to be a silent shadow, Finn how to feel the whispers of the wind to anticipate movement, and Seraphina. She helped Seraphina understand the empathic surge, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a way to cloud minds, to project calm or confusion. And then, Ilara pressed a small dark vial into my hand. Wolfsbane essence, she said, highly concentrated, not enough to kill an alpha, but enough to disorient, if the moment is right. My heart hammered. This was it. No more running, no more hiding. My children, their faces pale but resolute in the dim light of the caverns, looked to me, and she let it happen. The fear, the doubt, it washed through me and out again, leaving behind only a cold, hard certainty. I was their mother. I was Rhys's mate. I was a Luna of the Moonshadow Pack, whether Marcus acknowledged it or not. As the sky outside began to pale with the first hint of dawn, we stood ready. The path Ilara showed us was treacherous, leading into the very heart of our enemy's den. But we would walk it. For Rhys, for our pack, for our future. The final push had begun.
Following Ilara's shadowed path, we moved like ghosts into the underbelly of the Moonshadow Den, the air thick, with the metallic tang of too many wolves and an unnatural, crackling energy. My heart skipped, a mixture of dread and fierce determination. This was it. The eclipse was beginning, casting eerie, elongated shadows that danced like specters on the stone walls. We could hear Marcus's voice booming from the council hall above, his words dripping with false piety as he spoke of unity and strength, a strength he was about to steal through dark ritual. Kyle, a silent shadow at my side, pointed. A narrow ventilation shaft, just as Ilara had described. And then Finn, my little storm, looked at me, his eyes wide but resolute. He took a breath, and a focused stream of air pushed through the grate, carrying the first almost imperceptible scent of the concentrated wolfsbane Ilara had given me. A gamble. A prayer. Moments later, a flicker of confusion, a cough from above. That was Seraphina's cue. As if pulled by a string, she closed her eyes, her small face serene. And I felt it. A wave of disquiet, a subtle clouding of intent rolling through the pack members gathered above. Their mental link to Marcus momentarily fuzzed. Now, Mama, Kyle whispered. This was our chance. We burst into the council hall, just as Marcus and a hulking bloodfang alpha, his fur the color of dried blood, his eyes burning with malevolent power, stood before the ancient packstone, their voices rising in a dark chant. Marcus! My voice rang out, clear and strong, a Luna's challenge. He spun, his face a mask of fury and surprise. Before he could move, Rhys was there. Freed by Ilara's other agents who had used our distraction, he launched himself at the Bloodfang Alpha, a silver blur of pure, righteous rage, weakened but unbroken. I threw the remaining wolfsbane directly at Marcus, the potent scent exploding in the air around him, making him roar in disoriented fury. The fight was chaos, a desperate swirling melee. My pups, my brave echoes, created pockets of confusion, Finn's winds buffeting warriors, Kale darting like a shadow to trip and harry, Seraphina projecting waves of distracting emotion that broke their enemy's focus. And then I was beside Rhys, our wolves, our souls, finally united in battle, a mirror of fury and fated love against the darkness. We moved as one, anticipating, protecting, a force Marcus and his cursed ally couldn't break. Because of that bond, that truth, the tide began to turn. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus lay defeated, his dark ritual shattered, the Bloodfang Alpha driven back by a combined blast of Rhys's raw power and Seraphina's amplified empathic shield. The eclipse was passing, and true light, painful and cleansing, flooded the council hall. Silence descended, broken only by ragged breaths and the whimpers of the wounded. More importantly, the remaining Moonshadow wolves, their minds clearing from Marcus's influence and Seraphina's clouding, stared at us. At Rhys, battered but standing tall. At me, his Luna. And at our 3 impossible children, who stood bravely before them. Without another word, Rhys stepped forward, his voice hoarse, but carrying the undeniable weight of the true Alpha. "Marcus betrayed you all," he declared, his gaze sweeping the stunned assembly. "He allied with those who would see us destroyed. He stole your loyalty, your pack, your honor." He didn't need to say more. The evidence was all around them. The fear in the eyes of Marcus's staunchest supporters was telling. The truth, as it always does, had unraveled. In the quiet that followed, Lyra, her ancient power now a gentle aura, began to direct the healing. Rhys's wounds were tended first, his strength slowly returning as the pack's true healers, freed from Marcus's suppression, worked their magic. I held him, just held him, the feel of his heart beating against mine a miracle I'd almost given up on. And then he pulled back, his silver eyes, clear and filled with love, finding mine. "My Luna," he murmured, for all to hear. "You saved us. You saved me." Before the words fully left his lips, Kale, Finn, and Seraphina rushed to us, a tangle of small, furry bodies and joyous yelps, our family, whole, as if the world narrowed to just that moment, the pain of 8 years, the betrayals, the fear. It all began to recede, replaced by a fierce protective love that encompassed not just my mate and my pups, but this broken, healing pack. Come morning, and many mornings after, the Moonshadow pack began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Trust was a fragile seed, needing careful tending. But then, with Rhys leading with a strength tempered by his suffering, and with me by his side, sharing the burdens and the joys as a true Luna should, the pack started to believe again. The children, no longer a secret, became a symbol of hope, of the pack's powerful future, their unique abilities honored and carefully guided within the safety of Moonstone Ridge's ancient sanctuary. Lyra had revealed it was intrinsically tied to our lineage and would serve as their training ground. Eventually, the day came. Rhys and I stood before the entire pack, our bonding ceremony finally complete, not with the naive hope of youth, but with the profound certainty of those who had walked through fire and emerged stronger, together. The wind carried our joined howls, a song of renewal, of love rediscovered, of a family and a pack. Finally, home. And beneath the moonlight, our 3 little echoes played, their laughter the sweetest magic of all.
Epilogue. 2 summers had passed since the shadows were banished from Moonshadow. 2 summers filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, not of fear, but of home, real home. The Moonstone Ridge. It still held its ancient magic, its silent wisdom. But now it was also filled with the laughter of our children, our echoes, no longer unclaimed. Kyle, already showing the steady heart of a future protector, would spar with Rhys, his small form a blur of determined energy against his father's patient strength. Finn, my quiet storm, would sit with Lyra for hours, learning to truly listen to the whispers of the wind, his control over the currents becoming a breathtaking dance. And Serafina, my silver-eyed wonder. Her empathic shield had become a comfort to the pack, her gentle touch mending not just minor wounds, but old hurts too. She could soothe a restless pup with a hum, or bring a moment of shared peace to a troubled packmate with just a look. They were magnificent, all three of them, each a unique note in our family's song. More importantly, the pack itself. It was healing. Under Rhys's strong, fair leadership, and with me, his Luna, truly by his side, the wounds Marcus had inflicted were slowly, surely mending. Trust. It had returned, like the first green shoots after a harsh winter. There were still scars, of course. Some ran too deep to ever fully fade. But they were reminders, not of defeat, but of what we had overcome. Together. Rhys. My Rhys. He still carried the marks of his ordeal, faint silver lines against his sun-kissed skin. But his eyes no longer held that haunted shadow. They blazed with the light of his love for us, for his pack, a steady, unwavering fire that warmed me to my soul. Our bond, it was a living thing, a vibrant tapestry woven from shared pain, shared joy, and a love that had stared into the abyss and refused to break. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, with our children sleeping soundly nearby, he would just hold me. No words needed, just the silent, powerful language of two souls finally, at peace. What followed was a time of rebuilding, not just dens and defenses, but spirits. We taught our children the old ways, the true ways, the importance of loyalty, of courage, of compassion. We showed them that an alpha's strength wasn't in domination, but in protection, and a Luna's power wasn't just in her intuition, but in her heart. That night, as I stood with Rhys on the high bluffs overlooking our thriving territory, the moon shadow valley alive with the soft lights of the den and the murmur of contented pack life, I leaned into his strength. Kyle, Serafina, and Finn were down below, their laughter carried on the gentle breeze, chasing fireflies. "We did it," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion too vast for words. He pulled me closer, his arm a comforting weight around my shoulders. "No, my Lyra," he murmured, his lips brushing my temple. "We did it." And as the first stars began to prick the darkening velvet of the sky, I knew he was right. Our journey had been a storm, a raging tempest of betrayal and loss. But we had weathered it. And now there was only the promise of countless sunrises, and the enduring magic of our reclaimed forever. The echoes were finally home.